what impact will this have on the people of this country? Who are the people who tend to buy these vehicles? We will all agree that they are people from the lower middle class and the poor people generally. I have spoken with most of the auto dealers, and uniformly what I get from them is that this will impact on a large number of people, because most of the vehicles that they bring in the country now are over 8 years old, and there is a huge market among poor people, ordinary people, for this sort of vehicle. Some of them can't even afford the purchase price of these vehicles. They take them on terms. Now, just to give you an example, one auto dealer said to me, if the new model Primo, a vehicle apparently that is in widespread use, the NZT 260, which would now fall under the 8 years restriction, were to be imported in preference to the older model, the 240, that the selling price will go from about $2.4, $2.5 million to about $3.6 million. Immediately, an increase of over $1 million, or about a 30% increase for the acquisition cost of that vehicle. Now, everyone would agree with me that it is a certain group of people who purchase these vehicles. And so they will now have, if they want to own a vehicle, they will have to find at least 30% more to buy that vehicle. I'm asking the Minister of Finance, I'm asking President Granger to extend this 8 years restriction to 12 years, so that that group of people can continue to drive a vehicle and not have the additional burden of finding over $1 million more for the cost of acquisition. Now, we can argue, as I suspect, that some of these measures have been announced in keeping with this concept of a green economy, less pollution, and basically they cost more, these vehicles, to maintain through spares, etc., importation of spares. On the first point, I have always sought to balance our strong push for a green economy through the low carbon development strategy with the need to improve people's lifestyles and not bring additional burdens on them. So we are in Guyana, our per capita emission is about 2 tons. We are not under any obligation to cut that. In fact, the INDC submitted by this government has no target to cut our per capita emission. The US and the others have per capita emission of over 20 tons. And so there is no need for us as an environmental obligation to do this. In fact, with our forests, we are a net carbon sink. We take out more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere in Guyana, which is a global benefit, than we put into it. So from that perspective, we do not need to do this. Of course, there will be more costs for importation of some of the spare parts, but you have to balance that against poor people's desire to own something and drive it. And therefore, I'm urging the increase from 8 to 12 years for the ban from 8 to 12 years. In terms of heavy vehicles, trucks, in particular trucks, canters, etc., I'm told this measure can potentially shut down the mining sector. It could have a crippling impact on mining and transportation across the country. We've heard this government saying that it wants to help small contractors. I'm told that a single engine, a single axle truck, a Bedford or Leyland truck now, if they have to comply with this new ban, the price will move from about $5 to $6 million to about $18 million, 3 times more. That for a double axle truck, the price will move from about $9 to $10 million to about $27 million. So how could a small contractor now afford an $18 million truck or a $27 million truck? And in the past, they would have paid $5 million or $10 million, depending on their axle. Now, clearly, this will harm transportation, it will harm the contractors, it will harm the construction industry because the cost of moving sand and everything will move up. It will harm the mining sector because most of those trucks are over 8 years old. It will harm the rice industry. It is a measure that will bring significant hardships on the productive sectors of our economy. And I'm told that many of the pickups that go into the interior are about 10 to 12 years old in any case, because if they're 8 years old, often you don't find them in the market or the price is very high. So the pickups that are used in the interior and the canter trucks, etc., that are used by many people, they are 10 to 12 years old. So I heard again that the British Army and the other armies that release some of these trucks release them after 15 to 20 years. So I'm urging the government to either remove this restriction, the 8 years ban on vehicles coming in the country, these types of vehicles, or go to between 15 to 20 years, put a restriction at that level that would allow some of these trucks that are being used in the interior and the other places across the country to continue being used without any major escalation in their costs. And this goes also for other motorized heavy-duty vehicles, front-end loaders, backhoes, if these were contemplated as part of the ban too. So I'm urging the second category, that is for vehicles, motorized vehicles that are used in the productive sector, that we either remove the ban totally or take it up to 15 to 20 years. On tires, I was speaking to a few people again on tires. And one man said to me, my Canter truck, which now uses size 16 tire, I pay about $16,000 for the used tire. The price will go now to about $70,000 because he had looked around and asked to get a new tire for that truck. Just imagine the price. This is for a Canter truck. For the bigger kinds of tires, the price would be astronomical. But even for ordinary people, just imagine the minimum wage, it's about $50,000. And you have to now spend 50% of your minimum wage to get a new tire for your vehicle. Half of your minimum wage, when it used to be probably $4,000 or $5,000 for that tire. It has gone now 5 times more, and it's equivalent to half of a person's minimum wage. We do have to. We're not the United States of America or other places where the per capita income is high. We have to adjust and tailor our policies to suit different groups of people in our country. Now, I can understand the need to get better tires. I do understand that. And we need to look at cutting down the fatality on our roads, etc. But if you look at the bulk of the fatalities on our road is because of speeding and because of drunken driving. And I am in favor of, and I want to urge the government here again, to withdraw this ban on used tires, but strengthen the Guyana National Bureau of Standards, expand its staff to see that the quality of used tires that are coming in the country are improved. So withdraw the ban and improve the capacity of the Guyana National Bureau of Standards to do this. The next issue I want to speak on is the increase in firearm licenses. And here again, I want to urge the government to exempt the Amerindians and the farmers. Because if Amerindians have a shotgun in the interior, they use this not for pleasure. Many times it's a tool to live. And so that this will create significant hardships, additional burden on those two groups of people. That I want to urge the government to exempt Amerindians and farmers from the increase in the firearm licenses. I want to urge the government to cut the over 130 licenses that are being increased, and fees, taxes, fees, licenses, etc. You will see it at the back of the budget. To cut the increases by 50%. Some of these have ranged from 50% to 700%. The increases now have been from 50% to 700%, and most of them are by over 100%. To cut the proposed increase by half. It is in the entire history of my familiarity with budgets, it's probably, in terms of the numbers of licenses and fees increased, this is probably the largest ever. Not just in numbers, but in percentage terms. And so I want to urge the government to cut those licenses fee by 50%. The Minister of Finance said he wants to introduce a new environmental tax. I thought we had an environmental tax and we removed the environmental tax. Any new environmental tax will create additional burdens on our people. And I want to urge that there be no new environmental tax. The discipline services do not engage in collective bargaining. So whilst I can understand the government saying that they have to delay salary increases for those sectors of the country that are in the public sector but are subject to collective bargaining, the discipline services would not fall under those restrictions, and therefore there should be an early increase or early salary announcement for the discipline services. Now, there are in the budget measures 6, 7, 1, and 2 announced by the Minister of Finance. He said that Guyanese will now have to seek tax compliance prior to the issuance of all licenses for public use, including licenses to conduct forms of trade and business. And they will also have to seek a tax compliance before they can benefit from any tax exemption from the state. Now, whilst I support generally the desire of any government to broaden its tax base, one has to look at the efficacy, the effectiveness, and efficiency of tax administration. Our GRA now does not have a substantive Commissioner General. It does not have a substantive Deputy Commissioner General. It's mired in controversy about the departure of the former Commissioner General. It has, we are told, limited capabilities to do audits of offending taxpayers, particularly large taxpayers. It has not been able to go after many of them because of limited capacity to do audits. And so, how will it deal with this large number of people who will now have to come into the GRA offices to seek tax compliance? I was told conservatively that this could bring in about 70,000 people who will now additionally have to seek tax compliance. Just imagine 70,000 people showing up at GRA in addition to those that they already have in the course of the year. If the 70,000, assuming that, say, 50,000 of them have not submitted their income tax returns for the past 7 years, and they now have to submit returns for the past 7 years, That's another 350,000 returns to go into GRA that would have to be assessed. To people who have had experience with GRA, just tell me whether you think they would have the capacity, or they have the capacity to handle the 70,000 new persons approaching them. Remember, there's an urgency. If you want your license, you want it now, or next month. You don't want it 5 months down the line. So when you go into GRA, you would expect them to, within a day or two, to process your compliance. Any right-thinking person will know that the GRA will not have the capacity to do this. It will become a bottleneck for business. It will create opportunities for even greater corruption, and I doubt whether it will significantly impact on revenue collection. Because assuming that these people are, say, farmers or the taxi driver or the conductor of a bus, most of them will claim, if our Prime Minister claimed that he earned $130,000 a month, that is what he claimed in the past based on his submissions. What do you think that people will put in their returns? They will file that they were earning below the taxable threshold, many of them. So they will file, yes, but it's not in the filing. It is in the increased collections. And if GRA doesn't have the capability of going after the big ones, to do the audits where large taxes are is leaked, how would they have the capability of going after the farmer who has 5 acres, or the minibus driver, or the taxi driver? Should they prioritize? So I don't know how much more it will bring in taxes, but it will be an administrative nightmare for the people of this country and create untold hardships, because many of those people now, the bus drivers, etc., the taxi drivers, will now have to go and find the auditors, etc., to help them prepare. Imagine all of them having, how many of those people do we have in the country? Imagine 20,000, just 20,000 people having to do that in the next 2 months. Just 20 of the 70,000 having to do that. Will they find the people to help them prepare those returns and file those returns? So sometimes when you do these things, they have to make sense. And I urge the government to have a second look at this, to do it in a phased way. Go after maybe the sectors that you believe that have the biggest potential to collect more revenue first. Do it in a phased way, and as the capabilities of the GRA improve, then you make it such a broad-based policy. And then they can easily, at this point in time, exempt some regions, the hinterland regions, for example. Regions 1, 7, 8, 9. How are those people wanting to set up a shop there will get their compliance? So I'm urging, again, the government to relook and adjust, relook at this broad-based policy that they have just put in place and adjust it accordingly to ensure that we continue to broaden the tax base, but we do not bring additional burdens on people and slow down the country and the economy as a result of a good desire, but without it being thought through carefully. So I believe that this has to change to a more sensible policy. I am going to stop there. Normally I want to go on and just take questions. There are a few things more I'd like to speak on, but these are some of the measures that I want the government to have a second look at, to change the policy. I would urge the Minister of Finance to adjust the electricity prices to match the reduction, the true reduction in the cost of acquisition of fuel to GPL. This 5% rebate, it's a joke compared to the savings that GPL has enjoyed. And why should it be effective from April 1? Why must it wait another 2 months? It has absolutely nothing to do with the budget. GPL is a corporate entity. It is a company incorporated under the Companies Act. It has special provisions about how it goes to adjust electricity rates. It has to file with the PUC. The Minister of Finance has no jurisdiction in announcing decreases, etc. GPL by now should have filed with the PUC the reduction in their rate because that is required by law for them to do. This was a measure to make the budget look a bit more generous to people. Why did we have to wait for the budget again to adjust fuel prices at the pump? Are we saying if fuel prices go up next month that we will wait until the 2017 budget to announce an increase in that is the cost of acquisition at the pumps again? Just think this through. It was all a facade, a sham, just to make the minutes. There were so few measures in the budget to get the minister to bring benefits to people that they had to do this. So I urge a real reduction in fuel, in electricity prices. And the money that is being given, I heard about the $2.5 billion that's being given to GPL that the minister announced. Well, I think to upgrade the transmission main, that is from a loan that we had negotiated. That is not money from the Treasury. That is from an old loan through the Inter-American Development Bank that we had negotiated and left, and they've gone out to tender for to improve the transmission main. So I saw that, it cannot be right that they're making all of this money because we have to inject $2.5 billion. But that injection comes from the loan. From the loan. So someone needs to ask GPL about their finances. And then again, I recall in early 2015 that GPL had done a document to file with the PUC showing their variable costs and fixed costs across all the generating sets and the average. And the average cost came out about 11 cents per kilowatt hour, but that did not include depreciation. So if you add 2 cents per kilowatt hour, or even maximum, let's be generous, 3 cents per kilowatt hour, the average weighted cost for kilowatt hour for electricity is about 14 cents. The Minister of Finance said 28 cents in the budget. It is wrong, and he said to justify them buying power at about, he said, about half the price of 28 cents from this Hope wind farm. So it is simple, it is easy for the press to find out. Get GPL, ask them, what is your cost in US cents per kilowatt hour, the average cost? And we'd like to see it broken down. And secondly, how much money, what is your cash position at this point in time? And how has it changed over the years with the reduction in fuel prices? So we would like to see that happen too, that the electricity prices go down and the price at the pump for gasoline and diesel go down to the level where it reflects the true cost of the reduction in the acquisition cost. Thank you.
Question do you think the reduction in fuel prices will be going down more? That's the first question. By how much more?
I looked at at least maybe 15% more. We looked at comparable periods when fuel prices were at this level in the past, and the price at the pump was about 15% less.
And second question, you mentioned that Guyana is not mandated to cut carbon emissions at this point in time. Mm-hmm. But do you think it's wise if any government want to cut carbon emissions no matter what? It may be mandated, but do you think it's still a wise measure?
Yeah.
Even the global scale.
Yeah. One is I'm in favor of a good climate agreement that will basically save our planet. Secondly, I'm in favor of a just climate agreement where the biggest polluters take the toughest action and they assist the developing countries in also cutting their emissions. In Guyana's case, in the Kyoto Protocol, we were not annexed one country. We were not required to do so. In the last agreement that was signed in France, in Paris, countries had to put up their voluntary standards, their INDCs. We did not agree to an overall cap on our carbon emission. We said we will do certain things in the energy sector and we will do certain things in the forestry sector. So even the voluntary targets we put forward in Paris does not require this. So if we are 2 tons per capita, we are already so low, our emission. Our forests probably extract maybe 10 tons or 15 tons per capita. So we are a net contributor to the world now, at this point in time. Why must we bring on additional hardships now to our people when the US and the others, many countries in the world, have yet to start doing this? That we are good global citizens. We are playing our part already. We're playing a serious part, but we are good global citizens and punish our people because of this, especially poor people. That's what I'm pointing out, especially the poor, because they are the ones who are going to face the brunt of the consequences.
Sir?
Yes.
On the vehicle issues, sir, the 8-year ban, you quoted some prices and you suggested that if they insisted on the 8-year ban, then these prices would automatically go up. But wouldn't the adjusted duties and taxes compensate for whatever price increase there would have been received?
No, because they're not unused vehicles. The adjusted prices so far are on new vehicles. So it's vehicle, I think up to 4 years old, right? That is considered new. So there's been no, if you bring in an 8-year vehicle, as far as I read the budget, the taxes would be the same like you paid in the past.
10%.
Huh?
10%.
Yeah, on the excise.
Do you have a figure, perhaps, of how many persons are earning minimum wage and driving vehicles?
No, I think you should ask the Minister of Finance that question. Yeah, so you should ask the Minister of Finance that question. But I think people who drive a vehicle, if there are 2 persons working in the family, sometimes they pool their resources to buy the vehicle. They take it on terms. So you can't correlate it directly to minimum wage. You have to correlate it to family income and also if they are on lease terms, etc.
Speaking on the investment to this wind farm, I wanted to know if you can explain some more. It's $50 million proposed, I think, government said that they will be investing in buying alternative energy from the wind farm.
Yes.
You would also pointed out that it's persons with close, the owners of the wind farm is persons with close allegiance to government. This wind farm you're talking about, one, this is my first question. Is this a wind farm owned by Lloyd Singh?
Yeah. Oh, you're asking me the question?
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it the same wind farm?
I'm asking. You were the person that said
Okay.
persons with close allegiance to government. So
I read in the papers that he was the developer.
And 2, are you saying that this US $50 million can be invested because I remember after the budget press conference, you said if the money was invested in Milo,
Yeah.
in the long term, you would get.
Yeah. No. I was just looking for something relevant to what you were saying. So I will read it to you just now.
Yes. If you're saying that this $50 million, this proposed $50 million to be invested in this wind farm, if you think it's wise the government use this $50 million US and invest it in a Milo, which will in turn bring
Sure.
more rewards from a long-term
Sure.
perspective, given that we don't know
Yeah.
the projections for
Sure.
wind energy.
Okay. So let's go through this issue in a sequential manner. I've heard, like you have heard, and I've seen it reported, that Mr. Lloyd Singh is the developer of this project. I've seen that reported. I've heard the Minister of Finance in the budget speech indicate that they are negotiating a power purchase agreement with this company to supply 25 megawatts of power costing $50 million, and that the price of the power purchase agreement will be just under half of 28 cents per kilowatt hour. So I'm assuming about 14 13, 14 cents per kilowatt hour. So these are information that we are gleaning from public statements. But look at the difference with Amila. Amila, we have had lots of controversy around Amila, around the road. But one thing we can claim is that it went to a public tender and that the lowest price bidder won the contract, and the evaluation of that road was done by technical people, Walter Willis and some others in the Ministry of Finance, not by politicians. The Amila project was tendered internationally, and Blackstone, an international group, selected the contractor, which is China Rail. So it was tendered. The opposition at that time made a lot of issues about it. There were 2 meetings at the office of the president to brief the opposition on all the elements of the project, including a $1 million spent by the company, by Site Global and the others, to do an environmental impact study. Now, they were briefed. They knew the elements of it. The documents were handed over. We have heard, look at the different approach now. We are hearing from the press that the government is negotiating with this company. No public process. No public process. So that's the first issue. In fact, what I was looking for, and the principal of this company, on the opening of the AFC office recently, to which we were invited, but we declined. In fact, I asked Ramjatan jokingly in the parliament, I said, which contractor financed it? And he laughed. And then Mr. Ramjatan had this to say, I want to single out a personal friend of mine, and from a long, long time since PPP Civic days, Lloyd Singh. We were looking for a building, and of course, Lloyd indicated that, Kemraj, I know you all got to get a building. I know of something. And of course, the advance payment on it, hey buddy, you don't bother with that. This is Lloyd Singh. We got to make this thing work. He upped the front up monies, and today we've gotten that building. Thank you so much, Lloyd. That was just last week. So this is the incestuous relationship. Let's examine the cost of this now compared to Amila. Amila, the average cost of Amila would have been about 10 cents per kilowatt hour. In the low season, we would have gotten about 750 gigawatt hours around what we're producing when the dry season, because the reservoir will go down. And in the peak season, we'll go up to about 1,300 gigawatt hours when you had heavy rainfall. The average would be about 1,000 gigawatt hours. At $100 maximum cap, million US dollars per annum that we're capping, it would be around 10 cents per kilowatt hour for Amila. The Amila cost, the cost of the power generating sets was just under $2 million per megawatt, the same as the wind farm. But that was 10 cents per kilowatt hour we were buying from Amila, with $150 million spent on the transmission line, a big transmission line. Here, this is at Hope Estate. It doesn't have to spend a cent on transmission. And 150 million of the 850 under Amila was to just build the transmission line to bring the power down. If you didn't have to spend the 150, you would probably be getting power from Amila at about 8 cents per kilowatt hour, 7.58 8.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Here we are going to buy power at 14 cents per kilowatt hour. We don't know the negotiations that are taking place now. And we argued that it was too costly. 700 million of the 850 would have come from not our money, not the country's money, from investors, from China Development Bank and from the investor. We would have put in about 165, 100 from Norway and 65 from the other place. 100, and so 165. The rest from a loan from the IDB. That was our obligation to Myla. This is why we had argued about a fact-based assessment. But where is the public tender? Where is the evaluation of bids like we had with Myla? Where are the numbers being talked about? We hear they're negotiating another power purchase deal for the Chumari with some company. But where was that tendered? This is the difference. And so I do hope that the media is not going to just brush this under the carpet anymore. That it will ask the questions about when was the public tender done. If you're claiming that the IDBs, we can't go with Myla because the IDB is now doing a study, the Minister of Finance said, to determine the appropriate power mix for Guyana. How is it you're negotiating a power purchase deal now prior to the IDB study being completed about the appropriate power mix? And I hope that the Inter-American Development Bank is listening to this too. This is a Feathers Lloyd all over again. It is a Feathers Lloyd all over again.
Sir,
Yes.
as an economist and former Minister of Finance, is it some economic policy that a government will try to make money from sources other than the traditional export? For example, gold isn't doing so well,
Yes.
rice isn't going to do so well on the export
Yes.
market, bauxite, but the savings are coming from oil prices. Will you still insist that the savings in oil prices be taken so low as to ensure that John public enjoys these benefits, or are you going to enjoy the savings that the government will do?
Sure. Let me deal with that issue first. When you look at the country and its well-being, I think it's not about government doing well. It is about the government creating the environment for citizens to do well. We seem to have a different philosophy now. So rather than focusing on the productive sectors, a point that I want to return to, Adam, because there's been no new measure. If you look at rice, no help for the rice industry. And $9 billion subsidy to Gaisuko, but they had said, Moses had said it would be 12 billion. It's a cut. But nothing about whales. Not a cent for whales. Remember, we heard the government said they're focusing on creating alternative activities. Where is the money to create the alternative activities for whale? Nothing there. Then the mining sector. So now miners, no concession, but you hit them with their trucks, the vehicles, the point I made earlier, which will be an additional cost of transportation. And secondly, you were claiming that they can't enjoy any concessions until they have paid up their taxes. So all the small miners from the interior would have to now come out to seek tax compliance before they enjoy any tax concessions from the state, any benefits. So no help for mining, no help for bauxite, no help for the construction industry, no help for forestry, no help for fisheries. These are the sectors that create wealth. So what the government has focused on, there's wealth that is already created. It's in people's pocket. They're trying to take that now, transfer it from their pockets into the treasury. That is not expanding national wealth. That is just taking it from private people now through all these increased taxes and etc., and putting it in government coffers to be spent by government again, right? So we agreed that the country's economy and how it grows. Let's look at the formula once again. GDP is equal to private consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. Private consumption has gone down. Private consumption has gone down. Investments are going down, in spite of what the minister said. The minister said in 2015, Go Invest facilitated 100 and something projects worth potentially $89 billion of investment. $89 billion potentially. I notice he's wording the word potentially. There's no potential investment. How much was real investment? If you add the foreign direct investment plus the loans to the private sector from the domestic banking system, it's not $89 billion. So where is it financed from? Drug proceeds, like they used to say in the past? Because it has to be financed from two sources, either credit to the private sector or foreign direct investment. If you look at the balance of payment, add that to the growth in the monetary survey, in credit to the private sector, it's now $89 billion. So where did it come from? But is it drug proceeds, as they used to say in the past? But $89 billion. And then he said in 2016, they will facilitate 140-something projects that will create potentially 11 billion, from 89 billion to 11 billion dollars of investments. A fall from 89 or 83, is it 89? Somewhere, yeah, I think 89 or 83, to 11 billion dollars. Check that. So if their investments are falling from 89 by 70 billion dollars, it means there is no private sector confidence. And they will create 3,000 jobs. He already knows where the jobs are going to be created. So the thing is, the big lofty picture painted, when you go through the details, which will come out in the debate, of course, if they allow us to speak. But the thing is that will come out in the debate. But the investment component is gone, and we have already recognized that we will probably have our exports would be less than imports. So GDP, that is why I have argued that this is where the stimulus should go. Government, it's not about taking more for the government. If you give a lower tax rate, for example, on fuel to the private sector, you can still maintain or keep the tax rate at 50%, you know, the maximum. You'll have a slight shortfall in revenue. But the boost to the productive sector and to people will be massive so that they can produce more and you'll get more in other areas of the economy. It is the boost. What you're doing now is not transferring money to the treasury. You're transferring a significant part of the wealth from the productive sector and from ordinary people to the oil companies, private oil companies, because they are making the big margins now. That is my argument.
Dr. Jagdeo, the Minister of Public Infrastructure particularly has lamented that with so many, they have sent out to you requests for persons on various boards.
Yeah.
And you don't even acknowledge that you've gotten the requests, but no one is showing up.
Yeah.
Why?
I think I answered that question. I think Dennis Jabril asked me, and I answered it already. And I made it clear that this fiasco that took place in Gaisuko is a testimony to the fact that we made the right decision not to participate on these boards. Where when the union showed up, the management told them the decision was made by the board. Then we heard the close, I'm talking about the closure of Wales. Then the minister said that this decision was made by the management and it was part of their plan for 2015. And we had to point out that that couldn't be factual. Then we heard the president said the COI is not gospel. So, because if it was part of their plan to close Wales Estate in 2015, the management's plan, then why were they tilling the land 2 weeks or 3 weeks before to plant more cane? Secondly, if their decision was made prior to the COI, why did the acting chief executive officer and Mr. Clive Thomas, the chairman of the board, not tell the COI that there was a decision to close Wales already? I suspect that the decision was made elsewhere and the board and management has to implement it. And we don't want to rubber stamp any of those issues. We've made it clear. Once there is a clear signal from the president that that will not be the case, then maybe we'll reconsider this position. But we will not be party to this sort of thing. So, and I can give you other places too. I can give you other places, even the GRA. Even the GRA. I've heard about letters that were sent from the office of the president to say these people are exempt from reporting to the Commissioner General and to the board. That there have been letters sent from the office of the president for people installed in GRA who now don't have to submit to the jurisdiction of the Commissioner General and to the board. And the media can dig a bit more, and I'm sure you'll find those letters, because I'm sure of their existence. So that is the reason why.
So the seats for the opposition in all the boards except for...
We made it clear we will participate in some boards. The ones where they're humanitarian and social. So the adoption board, I think there's one that the school, not the school boards, the board of guardians and things like that, that we will participate in those, the ones that deal with pensions and stuff like that across the country, pensioners. Those are boards that we believe are humanitarian, outside of the politics. We hope they remain outside of the politics, but on the others, no.
Can you follow up, and then I substantive question. Is it because the people does not want to be part of the decision making that maybe a good decision, but because you kind of have to criticize it in the future, that you opt to take this position if you don't want to participate in those boards? Substantive question, sir. What is the status of Dr. Jagdeo in the parliament? He's been absent from a number of sittings.
Yeah.
Has he opted not to participate any further? Will he be replaced? What is happening?
Yeah. Dr. Jagan is abroad. He is seeking medical attention. Yes. The second issue is that we have not been shy. We made it clear we will not attempt to deny benefits to people by acting the same way like the APNU AFC when they were in opposition. So every sector that we have spoken about, we have criticized in every sector, we have offered alternatives. We said, here you can, in the sugar industry, let's jointly approach the Indian government, because if the idea was you didn't have money to fix the factories, then we can find the money to fix the factory together. We can. Secondly, in the rice industry, we wrote the minister about a 9-point plan. We have called in the mining sector for a reduction, a sliding scale for royalty payment, and a removal of the lease fees. We're calling now for help to other productive sectors in specific ways, in very specific ways. We've never been shy about making our views known, criticizing, and then offering alternatives. Take, for example, the GRIF. You know, the Minister of Finance pointed out in the budget that they're trying, one of their main planks is building a digitalized economy and knowledge-based economy. He spoke at length about it. And guess what? He said there'll be 30 million for a center of excellence in IT, 30 million Guyana dollars, and they're going to put in $3.1 billion into the sector. And then, if you look at where it's coming from, it's from the GRIF, the Norwegian funds that we had negotiated and left. That Mr. Ramjatan went and said to the Norwegians, do not disburse. I met with the Norwegians recently, the ambassador. I did not say to them, this government is violating all the tenets of the LCDS, therefore stop disbursing the funds. I did not advocate that. So this is the entire strategy about knowledge-based economy and how it's a new trust. Guess where it's being funded from? A project that we left, that they criticize, and they urge the Norwegians not to disperse the funds on. So this makes this whole talk about knowledge-based economy nonsensical. All they're putting in that's new money, not from the PPP days, is 25 million for the Center for Excellence in IT Studies. Let me give you another example of duplicitous behavior. There are many. They said that all the money were held outside of the budget. You remember the private accounts. And we had stories after stories written about it, and parliamentary motions after parliamentary motions. And then after the government got into office, who the money was there for people to steal, etc. And the Minister of Finance in his budget said, we are initiating a phased transfer of this money. So last year we took a little bit, this year we are taking a bit more. It doesn't require a phased transfer. It could be done with one signature in a minute, all of the money. So that, again, that was one of their big planks about money held outside the budget to be stolen by the PPP. Now they have changed their position on it. They have changed their position on contract employees. They had this big talk about contract employees was a PPP thing to employ large numbers of advisors and everyone else. The number has skyrocketed under APNU, and GPSU and the TUC used to criticize us on these things. I don't hear the criticism now where the contract employees have skyrocketed, and there is absolutely no transparency around their hiring. At least we knew the people here. But we have 30-something advisors abroad and all sorts of people. Every day you have new advisors being put in place. 30-something abroad. I don't know if we have a list of their names and what they're qualified for. So that has changed too. I've already spoken about the Feathers Lloyd, but they have announced in this budget money to move ahead on the project. But they have not, they said Feathers Lloyd only has an MOU to assess what work was being done. So before you start contract negotiations now, the country should see what the assessment was. And it can't be with Feathers Lloyd because they have an inside track. And they lied. The Ministry of Finance said that in the evaluation, Feathers Lloyd was not disqualified. They were ranked number 2. They were disqualified. So if they're using the old evaluation. And so these are important issues. They put in money to start the project, but I hope it's not with this company. And because that would be, the VAT collection, so they have moved away from that too. The hospital, first of all, was not necessary. It was corrupt because of the Feathers Lloyd's arrangement, because of the bid. Now it's a good hospital, and it is, they're moving ahead with a contractor who is disqualified. The VAT collection is programmed to increase by 9.9% this year. Well, $4 billion increase in VAT. They argued that the VAT rates would be reduced. Now, if you don't want to reduce the VAT rates, then you should at least hold constant its collection. Hold constant its collection. But you are expanding VAT collection significantly. So they have moved away from that too. On procurement fraud, this country has heard Professor Clive Thomas and Mr. Gulsaran spoken and written at length about $28 billion, or 30% of public procurement, is fraudulent. It's every year it goes into people's pockets. We have not seen, we heard the minister said, we are going to raise tender board limits for ministers at the ministerial tender board. Now that is dangerous because it will not, at ministerial tender board, you don't have the same level of scrutiny as you have at the central tender board. So what they're doing cleverly in this budget is to raise the limits. So ministers now, without coming to central tender board, can, at their level, can approve projects up to $18 million without the transparency requirements and many of the things. They have even raised the limits for contracts that you can do selective tendering on and treat quotes. So when you do that now, you can buy, say in the past, $1.5 million, you can buy only on a three-coat system, up to 1.5. Now, up to $5 million. Then an example of how it operates. So now, someone in the ministry could call around and say, oh, I want 3 coats, and then award a contract like that. That has gone unnoticed. It is an attempt to shift out of the public's eye much more of the procurement. Much more of the procurement. Gone unnoticed. I've not heard anything about this. And so how are they going to, what single measure have they put in place to save this $28 billion they said that the PPP used to steal from public procurement? In fact, they put $1,000 for the Public Procurement Commission this year. So it means that they don't want the Public Procurement Commission, which is a manifesto promise that they'll do it in 100 days. They don't want it in place. So where is Clive Thomas now? Where is not Martin Gulsaran, Anand Gulsaran? What are they saying about the $28 billion that annually used to be stolen and procurement fraud. What in this budget or anything in the government policy is designed to save that? 2015, they argued that it was a rushed job. But what is in this budget to save the $28 billion in fraud for this year? What have they announced? Nothing. So it's either it was a lie or they are going to steal $28 billion this year. They're planning to steal the $28 billion if that's the case. So these are just some of the things. Let's look at the gold exports. They keep saying 15,000 ounces per week. The Minister of Finance mentioned it again. Now, if you multiply that by 52, you will get something like close to 800,000 ounces per year. Now, if they block that, just imagine if they block that, the big growth to the GDP will be phenomenal. That's at $1,000 per ounce, that's 800 million US dollars. At a 5% royalty, they will get about 8 billion Guyana dollars, 40 million US dollars. So 8 billion Guyana dollars can increase the public service wages significantly, can increase the pension significantly, can restore the cash grant to the families, that the 10,000 cash grant that we are calling for restoration, can restore the subsidies that pensioners got. Why don't they do it? Now they're in office. You're claiming that this used to leak under the PPP, 15,000 ounces per week. Now you're there now. Block it, take action. You'd get in revenue $8 billion. You'll get a big boost to GDP. And by the way, you saw the boast of the minister that gold production would skyrocket. The two new the gold plants, the gold operations will significantly lend to that, and both were developed under the PPP. And the oil and gas, the investment came under the PPP. Where is this big new investment that we're hearing from them? Oh yes, the farm, the Hope Farm, the wind farm. Oh yes, and Feders Lloyd. Yes.
In his presentation, the Minister of Finance had said that state audits have revealed many acts of, and I quote, dishonesty, duplicity, mismanagement of resources, opaqueness of transactions, etc. He said there were also laws violated with impunity.
Yes, I'm aware of that. He said most of these audits have been completed. I am in favor of the Minister of Finance being transparent. They spent $150 million of taxpayers' money. Release all the audits. That's where they should start. Give it to the newspapers, give it to the TV stations, to everyone. Let it be, put up a website and put up all the audits that are there. That's the first thing they should do, since we are calling for transparency. If anyone has broken the law, then you can refer them to the police, okay? If anyone has broken the law on any of these audits. But the first thing that it starts with is releasing the audits. Releasing the audits, because these audits, they use our money to do these audits. Isn't that what should happen? That they should release the audits first thing, and then take action against anyone who has violated any of those provisions that you have mentioned. Any of those.
And my follow-up would have been on your party's image. You're saying we release the audits, charge whoever. How do you feel about a former minister of your government who's now facing several charges for fraud?
Yes, the court, this matter is in court. And so whilst I have sought explanations and I've gotten the explanations. I cannot speak about this here because those things are part of our defense. Those things are part of our defense. But as it unfolds, let me make it clear that people have to submit. Once it's not a witch hunt and there are real issues and the investigations are done professionally, then any member of the PPP who has to face the court for any alleged wrongdoing, they have to face the consequences once the investigations are done professionally. That's all we are asking, professional investigations done, and not part of a witch hunt. We have the head of SARU every week saying who should be locked up. How could anyone, a single person in this country have any confidence that SARU will be acting impartially? How could any single person on our side? That sort of thing. So this is why we cannot cooperate with SARU. But we will, if there are other agencies of the state that are under our laws designed and mandated to investigate any acts of illegality, then those agencies will be cooperated with, but not a SARU type, a witch hunt type of activity.
So you're saying the image on the party is part of...
Yes, because we have to, at some point in time, she will have to give answers. I don't want to prejudice her court case and what her lawyers advise her about any explanations, but she will have to speak on these matters directly. In fact, we have already asked that that happen without prejudicing her own court case. Yes, please.
You said basically in a nutshell that there is nothing really in the budget for the ordinary man. But can you say, in your view, who stands to benefit from the budget?
Oh, okay. Actually, why don't we follow the trail of a few of the measures, and you will see they end up at the so-called, they had this concept of friends and family. Why don't we follow the trail of the few measures that were favorable to people, or favorable measures in the budget? You will see that the trail leads to individual companies, either singly or a few companies, and some with serious connections. Follow the trail of the measures. Ask who will benefit from certain measures, the few measures. It's definitely not helping the poor people. They're not helping the poor people. One of those measures will cost the Treasury hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes. Hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes. And I'm not speaking about the vehicle one. I'm not speaking about the vehicle. I don't want to call companies' names here. I've called one because he is there. And will you not also check about the story on the write-off? And I don't know the name of the NDC. I thought the last time I spoke about a particular supporter of the AFC getting a $19 of $22 million write-off after the elections. Now, I gather I was wrong, that it's not 22 million, the tax liability was for 30 million, and they ended up paying only $3 million. This is taxes owed to a particular NDC that was her stelling, I heard about her stelling that was written off. Why don't we hear that story? I don't see Adam Harris putting that in the newspaper to Adam, since you're here. Okay, I spoke here several times. I'm trying to get the media to follow some things like the 28 cents per kilowatt hour, this whole story about the Hope Wind Farm, what went on at GRA, whose tax records, who were the corrupt people who were rehired at GRA. It should be easy to get the names. And the resourcefulness of Kitesor News is beyond question. It should have been able to front page them with the pictures and what they were terminated for in the past. Okay, that would be perfect. I'm glad to hear that. Those kinds of things that will help the country. Anyhow, thank you very much.
Thank you.